My brothers and sisters, the Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, Lord.
When the Pharisees, with some scribes who had come down from Jerusalem, gathered around Jesus, they observed that some of his disciples ate their meals with unclean, that is, unwashed hands. For the Pharisees, and in fact all Jews, do not eat without carefully washing their hands, keeping the tradition of the elders. And on coming from the marketplace, they do not eat without purifying themselves. And there are many other things that they have traditionally observed. The purification of cups and jugs and kettles and beds. So the Pharisees and the scribes questioned him, "Why do your disciples not follow the tradition of the elders, but instead eat a meal with unclean hands?" He responded, "How well did Isaiah prophesy about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrine human precepts.' You disregard God's commandments, but cling to human tradition." He summoned the crowd again, and he said to them, "Hear me, all of you, and understand. Nothing that enters one from the outside can defile that person. But the things that come out from within are what defile. From within people, from their hearts, come evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from within, and they defile." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good morning. Today we have an unusual feat in our readings. Most often the first reading that we hear in the Gospel are chosen to complement one another. And our second reading is a semi-contiguous reading, usually from a letter. But today's second reading is from the beginning of the letter of James, and it dovetails very nicely with the two discussions of law that we hear from Moses in the reading from Deuteronomy and from Jesus in Mark's Gospel. Excuse me. Our reading from Deuteronomy is a retelling of the end of the book of Exodus by a slightly different author. The people have been in the desert for ages. They're soon to cross over into the land that God promised them. And Moses is exhorting the people one more time about being faithful to God and the covenant. It won't be long before he'll turn over leadership of this group of people to Joshua, who will lead them into the promised land. But he tells the people, "Observe carefully the commandments of the Lord, for thus you will have evidence of your intelligence and wisdom." He says, "In your observance of the commandments which I enjoin upon you, you shall not add to what I command, nor subtract from it. Oh, the additions and the subtractions we have had since the time of Moses. In the Jewish tradition, there is a retelling of the law of Moses, 613 points on a specific holiday in the Jewish year. I've forgotten what that holiday is, but I can imagine that probably less than 1 in 10 of the Jews could actually recount with any authority what those 613 laws are. So let's take a look at today's gospel. If you will recall, the last time I preached on Mark, and I told you that the Pharisees and the scribes, Mark didn't like them very much. They're no friends of Mark. He portrays them constantly as challenging Jesus, especially concerning the law, in looking to trap him in some way. And that is where we find ourselves with today's gospel reading. He says, "Why do your disciples not follow the tradition of the elders, but instead eat their meals with unclean hands?" If you'll notice, there is no accusation here of breaking the law, as when the disciples picked the grain a few weeks ago and had a snack on the Sabbath. But it was failing to follow tradition. There is no requirement in Mosaic law for washing your hands before you eat. The tradition comes from the Talmud, multi-volume examination of Mosaic law, and from the teaching tradition of the rabbis. Now, I'm sure that all of your mothers would agree that washing your hands before meals is a good practice. I'm sure you've heard that. I have. But it's not absolutely required. Think addition to the law. His response, Jesus' response, comes straight from the prophetic words of God through the mouth of Isaiah, when he said, "You hypocrites! You honor me with your lips, but your hearts are far from me, and in vain do you worship." And then he teaches the crowd what the scribes and Pharisees should have known. "Hear me, all of you, and understand. Nothing that enters you from the outside can defile you, but only those things that come from your heart." Now, Mark portrays the Pharisees as trying to trap Jesus, but they were not really trying to lead the people astray. You see, they were the ones who studied the law. They studied the Talmud, and that contains hundreds of years of interpretation of the law. It was meant to be good. It was, and it is good. However, like anything that is good, if you take something to the extreme, it often ends up being bad. The church has promulgated many rulings and many rules about things that are really good, but when you take them to the extreme, they end up sometimes being heresy and sin. Think the Spanish Inquisition, for example. But how about us? Could any of us really recount church teachings with any authority? Now, you probably know some fairly well, but do we really know the church teachings? In my years of studying to become a deacon, I was continuously surprised to learn how much I really knew about the church that was really wrong. Much of what we know has come from word of mouth, or has come from someone who has actually misunderstood the teachings themselves. So how much time do we really spend trying to learn about our faith? Would you trust a tax accountant who graduated with honors in 1970, but has not really reviewed tax law since? How far would you be willing to add or subtract from the tax law when the IRS comes knocking on your door. And the difference between the tax man and with God, God is mercy. So there is nothing wrong really with tradition. Some traditions are extremely important to observe, but some not so much. So don't confuse tradition with church teachings. Here's some examples of traditions maybe. When I was growing up, some of you might be as old as me and remember this. Gentlemen did not come to church without a tie and a jacket. And ladies did not come to church without a hat or some kind of head covering. I don't see any hats this morning. And I only see one tie. It's a tradition, it's not a church rule. It was my mom's rule, but it wasn't a church rule. Do not add or subtract for yourself or for others. For to do so can lead to sin. I would suggest that you learn all you can about Scripture and church teachings, and don't take someone else's word for it. So, in addition to learning the Bible, there are innumerable scholarly writings. And there is canon law. There's only 1,752 of them. And of course, there's the catechism, which we should all know. There are 2,865 subparagraphs there. And you can learn this, and you can apply that knowledge to yourself and to others with God's mercy in your heart. But if your life circumstances don't really permit you to spend extensive graduate level learning for the rest of your life, there is a simpler way. And I'll refer to the letter of James. With mercy in your heart, apply the words of James. Humbly welcome the word that has been planted in you. It is able to save your soul. Be a doer of the word and not a hearer only, because that deludes you. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this: care for orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep yourself unstained in the world. It's that simple. Think of God's mercy and apply that in your life. Do not add or subtract. Do what is right for yourself. Do what is right for others. Follow the law that's written in your heart. And make your own traditions.